And Yahuwah direct is Yahuwah's way or Yahuwah's direction. And we get our statement scripture from Yahukanan 14:6, and that says, and it says, Yahusha said to him, I am the way and the truth and the life, and no one can come to the Father unless they come through me. And the word way, I am the way, is the word direct. So Yahushua was saying, I am the direction, I am the path, I am the truth, and I am the life. And you can't even get to the Father unless you get through him. So Yahuwah direct. Direct, you can find in Strong's H1870. And it means a road, or it can mean like the way you live or a type of action. And it can also mean a journey, a manner, a pathway. So when we think of Yahuwah direct, it's the path that he has set for us and the way that we need to live to coincide with what he commands us in the scriptures. Oh, I'm sorry. It says you can't see anything, so let me... All right, how about that? Is that better? Hopefully you can see that. So I'll go back. Here's Yahuwah direct. Here's our statement scripture, Yahukanan 14:6. That word way is direct, and this is how you spell it in the pictographic Hebrew. And this is, of course, Yahuwah. Here is the Strong's definition. Just a brief review for those who could not see. Okay, and now the Hashema, which is in English the hearing, and you can find that in Devarim or Debariyah 6 verses 4 through 6, and I have it for you here in the pictograph. Shmai Yasharel, Yahuwah Eloah Ya'am, Yahuwah Akkad. You shall love Yahuwah, your Eloah, with all your heart, soul, and everything that is within you. These words I charge you with this day shall always be in your heart. And as you can see, I have the pictographs, and I will speak it in Hebrew. Ahab Yahuwah Elohim Labab Nefesh Ma'od Dabar Sava Yaom Labab. And in essence, that is the same thing that I just spoke in English. All right. So today we will be talking about the significance of the tent. And what I have before you is a picture of a Bedouin tent, which is pretty similar, or what scholars believe is similar to the tent that Abraham would have used. And the Bedouins today, the ones that are left and are still nomadic, they maintain a lifestyle that is very similar to what ancient Hebrews used to. So this is a goat hair's tent. And in the scriptures, you will see plenty of references to the black tents or like in Job, Yahweh stretches the sky like a tent. And that is in reference to these tents. They were usually black or brown, and they were made of goat's hair, and they offered great insulation, but also they in the heat of the day, the skin, you could see openings like pores where air could come through, and you could see some of the stars, like the light from the stars. And then when it would get wet, when it did rain in a desert, it closes up and it's like waterproof. So it has a dual purpose, and we will get more into that right now. So the first verse that makes reference to being in a tent in the scripture is in Bereshith 18 verse 1. And this is where Yahuwah, the angels, come down because they're on their way to Sodom and Gomorrah. And Abraham is sitting in his tent and he sees them walk by. And so I have that scripture for you here. And there are some things to remember when it talks about tent life is several customs. There were several customs and things utilized during the time, and we will talk about that now. And here's another tent, another Bedouin tent, and you can actually see the strips of hide that are sewn together. And not only for waterproof and things like that, but these tents were great for insulation. So you can see underneath is the tent, and then they lay the goat's hair across the top. So 3 points that I'd like to make today with regard to the tents and their significance to the scriptures is that the first one, the tent is made for the family. Only a part of the tent is for visitors. The rest is off limits and for family only. 2, the father would sit in a doorway of the tent and render judgment on familial issues. 3, the men during the part of the day and in the evening, they would go to the tents and they would eat dinner and they would rest and they would discuss business in the doorway, and they would do a lot. They would discuss business. They would sit in the doorway so they could look out for strangers. They would keep an eye on their livestock, because living in a desert and living in a nomadic lifestyle was very anyone can come on you at any point. So let's get into our first point. The tent is for family only. And a good scripture that I found, well, a good chapter in scripture that I found was in Bereshith chapter 31. And this is the account where Jacob has married Leah and Rachel, and he has been working for his father-in-law, Laban, for about 20 years. And every time that he has made several attempts to get loose from his father-in-law, but he's thwarted in all of those attempts. So when we get to chapter 31 is when he actually makes a run. He makes a run for it with his wives and his belongings and his livestock. So here are a few subpoints under the tent is for the family only. The first one is, again, strangers and visitors were allowed limited access to the tent. Okay? Women and children were kept in a certain part of the tent area. And you can see a reference to that in verse 33. And that is where Laban actually catches up with Jacob and his daughters, and he wants to know, why did they run? Why did they take off? And Raquel, she takes Laban's idols, his little pagan figurines that he uses in his household. And Jacob doesn't know that. So when Laban confronts him on that issue, he lets Laban search all of the tents. So in that verse 33, Laban is searching. It says that he searched Leah's tent, and then he searches Raquel's tent. In that same verse, it obviously, if Laban was not Jacob's father-in-law, Jacob would not allow him to go in any tent and to search for any, anywhere that he wanted to within Jacob's camp. So that shows that because he was family, he was allowed to look in every tent. And then the last point is a portion of the tent was considered sacred for prayers and worship only. And you can see that in verses 19 and 34, where obviously Raquel in Laban's household, she goes to where that sacred area is and she takes those foreign idols. And then again, when Laban is searching for them and he's in Raquel's tent, that she she hides them and he looks and he can't find them. So let's look at the letter that's in the pictograph Hebrew that is actually a floor plan for some of the tents, at least in the beginning, some of the more humble nomadic tents, and that is the letter Bet. That's actually the letter for home. So as you can see here in this drawing, I've taken the letter Bet and I've enlarged it. And we can see that the tent is divided, and where you see these dividers at, it's actually like a rug or a curtain or a veil to conceal that part of the tent. As you can see, there's only one entrance, and this first area is where guests, strangers, friends would sit and they would eat and discuss and have meals, but they were not allowed past this point unless they were family. The next section that you have here is the proposed cooking area, and let me say that this is not an exact floor plan. This is an approximation. So where I have things situated, it might be in different areas, but this is essentially basically so that you can get an idea. The next area we see here is the prayer area, which is sectioned off, and that area was not for all the time use. It was just for prayer and worship. And you see another divider, and this is where the family would be and the women and the children would be kind of sequestered, especially if there were strangers around or if there were passing other tribes and things like that. Now you'll notice that the tent is facing east. And east, when you live over in the Middle East, that is always going forward. That's the direction that's used. At least it was back in ancient times. East is forward, south is to the right of you, north is to the left, and west is behind you or going towards the Great Sea, which would be the Mediterranean. Okay, and there was another purpose for facing east. During the night in the desert, it's very cold. And so once daylight breaks and the sun starts rising in the east, which it has always done, when the sun rises in the east, the inhabitants of the tent can throw back the tent doors, and the sun rays can both light the tent and heat the tent, so they can, prepare and get started for the day. So while we're looking at this, one of the things that I wanted to do was compare, because there are many scriptures that are referencing a tent, but for us in the West, we don't really understand it. So one of those scriptures can be found in Yahuchanan 10, verses 1 and 10. And Yahusha, this is the Good Shepherd verses, for those who are familiar with that. And Yahusha is saying, he's making reference to this, to a tent. So, truly, truly, I say to you, he who does not enter through the door into the sheepfold, but climbs up by another way, that one is a thief and a robber. And let me put this in. Obviously, in the desert, you had people, there were thieves, there were strangers, there were marauding tribes, and if you wanted to be sneaky and try to steal someone's valuables, or if you were trying to steal women, which was a very common occurrence then, you would try to enter the tent underneath the tent, try to slide underneath, or you would cut through the tent walls, so to speak, so that you could get in. And so they, meaning the people, the inhabitants of the tent, the men of the tent, they would know that you are just there for no good means if you don't enter in by this way and introduce yourself. And so then you could be labeled, a thief or whatever. And, according action would be taken against you. The thief does not come except to steal, to slaughter, and destroy. I come that they may possess life and that they may possess it beyond measure. So, if you're coming in by any other means than the front door, that person is there to steal something, to kill, or to destroy, by destroy the family or destroy what you have set up, or a combination of the three. And if you look at this floor plan, those verses make it a lot easier to understand what Yahusha is saying. And if he goes on to say that he is the door. Okay. So let's go to our next visual, and it is the tabernacle. Okay. Properly named the Mishkan. You can find that in Strong's H4908. Its literal meaning is to dwell from. And we get that from Shemoth, that would be Exodus, chapter 25, verse 8. And Yahuwah says to Moshe, and they shall make me a set apart place, and I shall dwell in their midst. Shekan is to dwell. Okay. The mem in front means from. So to dwell from. Well, obviously, Yahuwah wanted to dwell on the earth with his people, and he obviously came from the Shemayims or the Shamayims, or the heaven where he sits. So he wanted to have a dwelling place on earth. So Mishkan, which is to dwell from. So if we look here, we'll see some similarities to the tent. Obviously, is facing east. There's the entrance. You'll see two veils, sectioned off portions where that are more secluded than the rest of the area. Okay. You'll see the altar here for burnt offerings, so that could in essence be your cooking area. The places where the veils are at, that is where the Israelites or Yasharel could not go. Only the Levites, the priests, could go. Okay, and in one area is the certain part was only once a year. Okay, So in this part that's more secluded, here is your prayer section. We have your altar of incense, your menorah, you have the table of showbread, and that is an area that is less used. Then you have the Kadesh HaKadeshim, or this word. Now I apologize for not having this word marked out, but it was actually a part of this diagram and I couldn't use it. So here is the very sacred area, just like, let's go back, just like in this area, you had your sacred area, you had your cook area, you had the area where, you could enter in. Same thing. You have your entrance here, and again, one entrance. You have your entrance here, your cook area, your prayer area, sectioned off areas that were not permitted to just anyone. It's a running theme throughout the scriptures. So let's look at the third diagram that I have for you. And this is actually the temple during Yahusha's time. Okay, this is the temple that Herod built. And as you can see here, this whole outside is for strangers. Okay, the Gentiles, what they would call unbelieving peoples, nations, things like that. And again, here's the entrance. Okay, here's your area where the women and children would be. Go up these stairs and through this entrance, and you would have the court where the men would go. And then past this point, it would be for the priests, court of the priests. You have here your slaughter portion that could be synonymous with the cook area. You go through here, you have the more secluded area. There would be a veil here. And then there is a veil here with the most sacred place. And this reference that I used in conjunction with this visual is found in Chazu, or Revelations chapter 11 verses 1 through 2. And this, looking at this diagram, you can see where the family is only entered in certain place, strangers are only certain place, and it continues. So from the beginning of the scriptures in Bereshith to the end in Chazu or Chazon, it is the same and consistent. And a reed like a measuring rod was given to me. And the messenger stood saying, "Rise and measure the temple of Yahuwah and the slaughter place and those worshiping in it. But cast out the court which is outside the temple and do not measure it. For it has been given to the nations, foreigners, strangers, and they shall trample the set apart city for 42 months." So obviously that is something prophetic, but it is still in relation to the setup of the home, the setup of family. Strangers cannot enter certain parts. Okay? So this is a constant theme throughout the scriptures. All right? So point 2, the father would sit in a doorway and judge familial issues. The threshold of a door is considered a representation of the whole house. And I have some scriptures here for you that you can look. I believe in Debar 6:9, it's right after Yahweh gives the Shema, what we know as the Shema, and he says that you will post these things on your door. You will post what he stipulates, his commandments, on the doorposts. The second one is obviously where Yahusha is saying that he is the door. Okay? The second subpoint is being a part of a house meant that you had to align yourself with the rules and customs of that household. Okay? You can find references of that in Shemoth. That would be Exodus and 21 and 6. And I'm not quite I don't remember quite what that one is. But Yahushua, that would be Joshua 24:15, that's where he is saying he and his household will serve Yahuwah. Okay, and as the head of his household, Joshua, Yahushua, he made that stipulation. Okay, the last point I would like to make is that following a judgment or a statute, that the head of the household, the father, is understood to be a continual thing to be observed throughout the generation. So it's not just the person that's making that statement. It is something that is followed throughout generations. So not only him and his children in the reference of Joshua, when he said me and my house, he wasn't just saying him and the people living in his house. He was saying him and the generations after him. Okay, and you can find reference to that in Shemoth 29:42 and Yahuchanan 14:23. And again, looking at this visual, you can see, I thought this was a good visual to use. Yahushua is standing in the door. Here's the threshold right here. And you can't get to the Father until you get through him. So he stands for his Father's house. Okay. The last point that I would like to make as far as the significance of the tent and some of the customs surrounding it that you'll find in scriptures is that the men, they would eat, discuss business in that entrance way of the tent. Okay. So the entrance of the tent is where the men would, discuss business, trade, and marriage. Now in Bereshith 24, verses 32 through 61, this is the account where Abraham sends his chief servant to find a wife for his son, Isaac. Okay? So the servant goes to some family members of Abraham, and Rebecca comes, and the household, the servant goes, follows her to the household, and he tells her what his mission is. And once he tells Rebecca's brother what his mission is and how he would, pretty much like Rebecca for his master's son, they immediately go into the tent. The head servant is lodged for the night, but they have a meal and they discuss the terms of the marriage. And you can see that in Bereshith, that would be Genesis 24, verses 32 through 61. The second point is, as cities, obviously they didn't stay in tents. So as cities were built and people started living within walled cities, businesses and markets and some of the premier members of those cities would do their business just inside or just outside of those gates. And the first reference that I have and that is a carryover to what they did in the tents. They were just inside the entrance of the tent and they would discuss business. Well, as they moved to cities, they did the same thing. It just wasn't a tent anymore. So the first reference that I have is in Bereshith 19, verse 1. And this is the account where Lot, the angels come to Sodom. Lot sees them at the entrance of the gate. And it is assumed, because he was at the entrance of the gate, that he was a prominent member of that city. And you can see reference to that later in that chapter, when the men of the city are gathering because they want to have sexual relations with those two angels. Lot tries to stop them, and the men censor him, and they say, hey, we made you, you're a stranger, and we made you a prominent member of this city. And they say that right before they attempt to break down the door, and you know how the rest of the story goes. But the second reference is in Maasai, that would be Acts 17, verse 17. And this is where I believe it's Shaul, that would be Paul. And I can't remember which city he's in, but he's debating some people from other beliefs. Okay, he's debating them in the marketplace. And in those days, if you wanted the word to be spread and you want it to be seen, you want it to be known, you would go to the marketplace, again, which is just inside or just outside the city gates. So I hope that today I was able to show how the tent is significant, that some of the customs, like the father making judgments in the doorway, like the men discussing business just inside the tent. I hope that I was able to show you how that correlate to several different scriptures throughout the scriptures, throughout the whole book, and that it's a constant and consistent thing. And I hope that I was able to, show or help you get a better understanding of some of what's going on in some of these cases. So, in closing, you can find this and other webinars that I have produced. You can find this on YouTube. Here is the link. If you go to youtube.com, you can just put in Yahuwah Direct. Also, if you'd like to correspond with me for any reason, it doesn't have to just be a question or a comment. You can write to me at yahuwahdirect@yahoo.com. And at this time, I say, may Yahuwah abundantly bless you and your family with his ahab, his love, and his shalom, his peace. Thank you very much, and